Okay, learning target 8. I can describe the various glands in the integumentary system. So there's a few different glands, and if you remember from our past unit, we talked how epithelial tissue makes up the glands in our body. So now we're going to see what those things are doing and the secretions that they're producing. So our first one we have are called sebaceous glands. We have these all over our body, and they're secreting this stuff called sebum, which is basically oil on the surface of our skin. If you remember from last unit, we talked about holocrine glands or holocrine glands. Holocrine glands secrete whole cells that will rupture in order to release their secretion. So this is an example of a holocrine gland. Every hair follicle in your body is going to have two of these things attached to it, and both of them are going to produce this oil called sebum. Sebum's job is to keep our hair and our skin kind of soft and waterproofed and pliable, meaning it's not cracking, I guess would be the best way to explain that. So the sebum has a lot of jobs for us. However, unfortunately, when you hit that age of puberty, a lot of times we get an overproduction of sebum. That's what leads to acne. And some of you might be going through that right now, and I apologize. We have a couple of these things that will open directly to our skin, which we'd find on the corner of our mouth, rather than a hair follicle, but most areas, not almost all areas, wherever a sebaceous gland is, it's going to be attached to a hair follicle. When we get pimples, so if you have acne, if you've ever had a white head or a black head, it's because this sebum has been trapped in the ducts of the glands that are leading up to the skin. When that gets trapped, it just kind of builds up there, and then it just kind of bulges from the surface of the skin. If that is exposed, if that white oil is exposed, it becomes black because it's basically been oxidized, or it's become dirty. So if you pop a zit and then you start to see a blackhead form, it's because it's oxidized and that sebum has just accumulated some dirt inside of it. So here you go. You see the arrow pointing to where I would have a sebaceous gland. And again, every hair follicle is going to have two of these things. A couple of pictures of them there as well. Our next are called sudoriferous glands or sweat glands. Sweat glands obviously are going to produce sweat. We have two different types of sweat glands. The first one is called an eccrine sweat gland. These are the ones that we have all over our body. They're going to respond to body heat or exercise or environmental pressures, and they're trying to cool us off. We've talked a lot about homeostasis throughout the year. These are the sweat glands that are going to respond if our body temperature starts to rise. Tons on the forehead, back, neck, palms, soles. They open up to the surface, releasing their sweat. And it is a type of merocrine gland. Merocrine, if you remember, is going to release small bits of the cell that travel to the surface. The sweat from an eccrine sweat gland is odorless. I know a lot of people will stink when they sweat a lot, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But most of this eccrine sweat is odorless. Additionally, you have eccrine sweat glands your entire life. So from the time you were born, when you start sweating, it's from eccrine sweat glands. Like I said a moment ago, we have a ton of them. So you can see there, like on our palms and soles, 3,000 of these in just a square inch. So they're very dense, especially in certain areas. The other type of sweat gland that we have is called an apocrine sweat gland. Apocrine sweat glands are sweat glands that will only, and I'm going to go back. I made a mistake here. Okay, so I said merocrine releases parts of cells. That's incorrect. A merocrine gland, that's when the secretion will go straight through the cell wall, the cell membrane. Okay. That's different than, this is why I brought it up, because I realized my mistake. An apocrine gland, apocrine sweat glands are going to release parts of the cells or a piece of the cell to release their secretions. So our apocrine sweat glands are the only ones that will respond or that they become active at puberty. So they're not necessarily just going to help with temperature regulation, but when you hit puberty, we get apocrine sweat glands. These are going to be a little bit deeper in the subcutaneous layer, and they're found in certain areas of the body. Where I had eccrine sweat glands all over my body, apocrine sweat glands, you can see armpit, areola of the breast, and the skin around the genitals. And this is where our smell comes from. When you start to smell, these apocrine sweat glands have a bacteria that reacts to protein on the skin, and that's going to create an odor on the surface of our skin. Here's a great picture of where you would find it. Eccrine sweat glands, these are all over the body, and we have them our entire lives. Whereas apocrine, you see there, the areas where we have those are going to be present only after puberty, and they respond in different situations. So nerves, sexual arousal, being scared, things like that. That's when apocrine sweat glands are activated. Again, like I said, you can see the sebaceous glands attached to the hair follicle. You see two of them. And then notice the difference between the apocrine and the eccrine sweat glands. You see the apocrine is going to be a little bit deeper, even going into the hypodermis or the subcutaneous layer. A couple more pictures there. A couple other types of glands. First one we have is a ceruminous gland. Ceruminous glands secrete this stuff called cerumen, and cerumen is earwax. Earwax we secrete in our ears, and that helps protect our middle ear cavity so that that cerumen is kind of sticky and it will trap bacteria trying to get into our ears. And then finally, it's a type of apocrine gland as well. And then we have mammary glands. Mammary glands secrete milk. This is a type of apocrine gland, and this is in a nursing mother that will be feeding a young child as they're developing. And that is it for our glands.